Okay, we should be going live. And it looks like I am live. So, yeah, it looks like I'm live. I don't know. I'm trying to figure this out. But hope you can all hear me. Hope you can also all hear my keyboard. You can hear that? That all works? So, if you're here, then it's hopefully because you're ready to develop rock solid foundations for high level musicianship. And if so, then this is the place to be. I'm talking about developing amazing ears, the ability to read and write music, and more than anything, the ability to mentally process music at a high level. That's what I mean by musicianship. It's about developing your musical brain. People can hear me well. Someone said I was a little quiet. I can move the microphone closer. If I'm quiet, let me know. Anyway, it's all about developing your musical brain, your musicianship or your musicality to the point where these skills just become intuitive. They become a part of you. So lesson 1 was all about ear training, of course, and mainly about developing relative pitch. And we gave you some exercises, and these were really important. It's a critical skill. It's really important. So this exercise, if you remember, was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Or if you like, do, re, mi, fa, so, fa, mi, re, do. So you're learning all the different relationships between the different notes. If you've got a home note, then that would be 1. And then you could go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then eventually you'd be able to jump around 1, 5, 3, 1, 1, 2, 4, 3, 5, 3, 1, or whatever. Okay, so that's a really critical skill because it feeds into everything else. Then lesson 2 was on sight reading. And in that one, we got straight into business with a whole bunch of exercises where you could build up your sight reading. We looked at tricks and tips to start reading in different clefs, different key signatures, using everything that we had learnt in lesson 1. And if you missed either of these 2 lessons, then I highly recommend that you watch them just so you get the full value of this week-long workshop. I really enjoyed teaching the second one on sight reading, and I know a lot of people found the first one really useful for getting the point of relative pitch and how to start developing relative pitch. So this whole workshop is about building your musicianship. And musicianship is all about having the practical and mental skills to fully process and understand music. So if you're a composer, you want to be able to hear music or imagine music in your head, even complex music. And you want to be able to accurately write what you're imagining down on paper. So you want to be able to pick up other people's scores as well. And you want to be able to study other people's scores so that you can learn about composing. And if you're a conductor, then again, you want to be able to study other people's scores with ease. But also, almost more importantly, or just as importantly, when you're running a rehearsal, you absolutely want to be able to hear and understand and process everything that's going on around you. You want to be able to hear wrong notes. You want to be able to hear where the bad notes are coming from, why they were wrong, which part was wrong, why was it wrong, what mistake did they make and why. And even if not wrong notes, then you want to be able to process and understand the music that you're trying to communicate to your players and performers. So that's really an essential skill for conductors. If you're a performer, then again, you want to be able to read music, process music, and truly deeply understand the scores that you will be performing. It's not just about being able to read, it's about understanding and then being able to communicate that music to your audience. So you need to understand your music before you try to communicate it. And of course, if you're a teacher, then the more solid your grounding in theory, that's reading, writing, listening, ear skills, and so on, those key musical skills, then the better a teacher you can be, and the better a leader figure that you can be to help other people. You know, people will look up to your level of skill, whatever that is, as a benchmark to aspire to, and you will be a lot more efficient at helping students, diagnosing their problems, helping to fix them, and so on, if you work on your musicianship. So for all of these different aspirations, you need musicianship. Developing your musicianship is essential if you want to be successful in these fields. And the good news is, it's not that hard. It's easier than you would think to actually develop this. So I now believe that musicianship is one of the most important things that you can work on because of the way it feeds into everything else. And because I worked on my musicianship, it's led me to, well, you know, aside from making these videos, which I really love making, it's led me to conduct orchestras and choirs across Britain, America, whatever. It's led me to write music for various short films, various commercials. I've been able to sing with some great ensembles and some amazing venues and things. But more than anything else, I think it's about the confidence, right? It's about that sort of self-assuredness that you feel like you can take on whatever comes your way. And sure, all of us will always have more to learn, but because I worked on my musicianship, I feel like I have those foundations which will carry me to wherever I need to go next. And that feeling of confidence, it's having those foundations. I think you can't really put a price on that, you know? So anyway, we've already looked at relative pitch, and in lesson 2, we looked at sight reading. So what comes next? This is lesson 3, which is a roadmap for your musicianship. So the big questions are, what are the additional skills that will complete your musicianship training? How can you practice all of these skills together? And what is a structured progression for learning these skills? That's what we're going to look at today, okay? So the first skills that we've already looked at, they're critical. But skill 1, we looked at this in lesson 1, that was developing relative pitch, really crucial. And then the second key skill was learning to sight sing. Not just sight read, but sight sing. And I talk about why sight singing is so important in lesson 2. So if you want to learn more about that, highly recommend you watch those 2 lessons. But what else is there aside from these 2 skills? I'm curious if you can guess in the comments what the other skills are. Feel free to have a little guess. But I'll start with the first of these additional skills that can be really useful to train for your musicianship. I am curious to see your guesses. They might make me laugh. I don't know. So one key skill to focus on, and this is a skill that leads to many abilities. That skill is transcription. And actually, Frank is right on the money. He said dictation. And that's pretty much bang on the money. Transcription. So this is hearing something and then writing down what you are hearing. Or at the very least, singing it back or playing it back on your instrument. So why is this important? And well done, Jan and Frank got it immediately. First 2 guesses were bang on right, basically. So why is this important? Well, what it means is that you are mentally processing what you hear. If you're learning sight singing, it's about mentally processing what you read. You know, with sight singing, you're looking at something and you're mentally figuring it out. With transcription, it's more about hearing something and processing what you hear. Mage says dancing in perfect time. Maybe that'll come later. Maybe that's I think that's a core musicianship skill that I'm missing. But this is about processing what you hear. So let me show you exactly what I mean. Let's take this sequence of notes. Interesting sequence of notes, right? So I'll play it one more time. So, some people might find that intimidating. Some people might find that more straightforward. So I would say that level 1 of developing this skill is simply singing a line back. So on some level that requires musical memory, but it requires more than that. It requires at least a basic understanding of the relationships between the notes. So a lot of people might be able to do this intuitively, but I'll play it one more time and try singing it back. So let's sing it back together. 3, 4. La 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 la. Haley spoiled it for everyone. No, I'm joking. Written the notes down. But Haley has perfect pitch, so that's slightly aside to the point, because most of us don't have perfect pitch. We're trying to learn how to figure out the relationships mentally. We're learning to mentally process music, not just rely on our perfect pitch. So anyway, this will take some... So there are a few different ways you can think about this. For singing the line back, it might just come intuitively. And that's why I would take it to level 2 next, which would be playing the line back on your instrument. And if you do have perfect pitch, then maybe try to play it back in a different key. And then you'll be exercising the same muscles. Try to play the same line back, but in a different key. So now, if you've got to play a line back on your instrument, the key is do not guess. Do not guess. Don't go, no, it's not that. and then try to find the right one. Do not guess it, because that sort of defeats the point. The point of this is to really think about the relationships between the different notes. So there are two potentially different ways you can think about this. One could be, that's a minor sixth, that's a major third, that's a minor third, that's a whole tone. You could think about each interval. That's not how I would approach this, but that could be a tool that you use. Another way to do that is figure out what your tonic is. Figure out what do is, or what note one is. So in this case, when I hear this line, I intuitively know, well, I feel, and maybe this will take practice for some of you, but I feel that the tonic is this. So if I go ya be 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 be, I'm thinking about how each of those notes relates back to my tonic. So I know this is the dominant, this is the minor third, and then this is note 7. This is note 2, 2, 1, and then ba do. And it's just a chromatic leading note into the tonic, into the dominant. Sorry. If that seems a little complex to you, then that's okay. But it also means there is work to be done on your musicianship. If that seems a little intimidating to you, it means there is work to be done on your musicianship. So this skill would essentially teach you to figure out a song by ear. You know, when people can hear a song and they can play it straight out on the piano or their violin or the clarinet or whatever, that's because they're thinking about it. They've learned to understand the relationships that they're hearing or imagining. And so you will learn to play it by ear if you develop this skill. And then level 3 is writing the line straight onto paper. This is dictation, as Frank said earlier. That is sort of mastery of the transcription skill. That means that you understand your theory very well. It means you don't need an instrument to mediate between you and the paper, because you can write it straight down. And this is where you get composers like, I don't know, like Elgar or Vaughan Williams going on a long walk or sitting by the ocean and composing a beautiful piece of music with an amazing view, because they don't need a piano. They can imagine things and they can write it onto paper because their ear is very good, their understanding of musical relationships is very good, and they can hear music in their head very well. And they've got good theory as well. So look, this skill trains you to process what you hear mentally, and it trains you to translate it into music. And it also trains your musical memory, because you have to hold music in your head before you write it down. And having a good musical memory is, as you can imagine, a really useful thing. So you can see as well how this skill relates back to what we looked at in lesson 1 with relative pitch, and what we looked at in lesson 2 with sight singing. You need relative pitch to understand the relationships between notes. And you also need that backbone of theory if you actually want to write down whatever you're hearing. So another skill, I'll take your guesses. I'll give you 5 seconds to have a little guess. Another skill that's valuable for your musicianship is, and I sort of hinted at it just now, we're talking about Elgar or Vaughan Williams taking a walk, but that skill is audiation, which is the ability to hear music clearly in your head, even quite complex music. And some people actually have this naturally, but some people find this more tricky. And in any case, you can train your audiation. You can hear more complex music in your head if you practice it. So again, this comes more naturally to some than others. So how do you do this? Here's how I recommend approaching this skill. Practice composing a melody with no instrument straight from your head onto pen and paper. So practice writing a piece of music straight from your head with no piece of paper, with just a pen and paper, no piano, no instrument. Once you've written it, then by all means you can check it on a piano or sing it through afterwards just to see if you've got it right, to see how it sounds. But you should practice doing it with nothing but your head and a pen and paper. And I see Jean-Loup says, audiation is much harder when you have multiple notes such as chords. Yeah, it is. It is more challenging. But once you practice it enough, it's, I don't want to say just as easy, but it's just as possible. You can look at chords and actually fairly easily hear them in your head. It's absolutely a skill you can develop. Yes, audiation on a basic on a one-line level is the easiest, but eventually you can train to hear multiple lines at the same time in your head. It does take practice, and of course it does get harder the more lines you add in. So we practice this by writing a melody, just inventing a melody with no instrument, and then you can check your answer with your instrument later. And then you can start doing it with 2 lines, just like Jean-Loup was suggesting. 2 lines, and then 3, and then 4. You can start building up your skills of having multiple lines at the same time, right? So Haley has a sort of, this is a side note. Haley says she struggles to recall chord progressions. That can throw her off, and it depends on inversions and such. So in that case, I would really recommend, well, firstly, get familiar with what an inversion sounds like. You want to learn that that's what a root chord sounds like. That's what a first inversion sounds like. That's a second inversion, and so on. And so you learn what those sound like, and then if you follow the bass line, you can generally hear. Once, of course, again, it's a skill that takes practice. But if you then follow the bass line, hone in on the lowest note in the chord, you can generally follow chord progressions a lot more easily. That's my experience, and it helps that I've sung a lot of bass lines. But still, that's how I really approach following chord progressions. Anyway, this is all part of being able to musically process music, and it's a really valuable skill. Interesting. LTB says, our choir director has the other parts rehearsed while our section is supposed to audiate. It's a challenge, but it will make you better. Good for your choir director for doing that. It's always the most annoying melodies that get stuck in my head. I'm sorry about that. Okay. All right, no questions, I think. Yeah, okay. Let's move on. So the next question, I guess, is how do we practice these skills? And by the way, if you do have questions along the way, if they're relevant to what we're actually looking at now, then do ask them. And if there's a good pause in these moments, I can take a peek at your questions. So how do we practice all these different skills? So first, I want to introduce you to a key core principle of good practice, which I'm sure some of you have come across before, and that is the idea of deliberate practice. This was coined by the psychologist Anders Ericsson, and it's the idea that when you're trying to get better at a skill, then deliberate practice is most effective, where you isolate the areas of a skill that need improvement, you isolate specific areas, and then you stretch your practice in those areas a little bit beyond your comfort zone to induce growth, okay? And the funny thing is, when Ericsson was studying this idea of deliberate practice, he was actually studying top performing musicians. And he realized that the very best musicians of a certain age group typically did more deliberate practice every day than the average players. Average players would repeat the same things again and again and again. I'm sure we've all been there. I've certainly been there when practicing piano and that kind of thing. Probably why I never became a great pianist. But the top musicians would isolate the things that needed work. They would focus on the skills that they knew needed work, and they would push those skills practice just a little bit beyond their comfort zone. And that's how they would grow. And once you push yourself beyond that comfort zone, it expands. The comfort zone expands. You start to find that what you once found difficult will become easy, and that will make you that much stronger as a musician. Frank says it's a little bit like working out, and that's exactly right. That's exactly right. You work out a muscle and it feels a little sore, but then you eat right as well and you rest right, and that muscle will grow. And then you'll be able to find the same weight a lot easier next time, and you'll be able to lift heavier weights if you keep pushing your muscle just a little bit beyond your comfort zone. If you push that muscle too far beyond its comfort zone, you might cause damage, or you might just hurt yourself. This is quite a good analogy, yeah. It is like working out. But if you're lifting just the right kinds of weights, it will lead to growth. And in the same way, if you're doing just the right level of challenge, it will lead to growth. And deliberate practice does take energy, but it is deeply satisfying. Have you ever felt like you're in the flow of something? Just getting lost in your work. It might be composing, it might have been making music, playing, practicing your instrument, or maybe you were drawn to drawing, painting, writing, practicing a sport or something else. But there's something that happens where we're at just the right level of challenge. and that is called a flow state. It's where we lose track of time and we're just purely focused on this one task. And a flow state is actually a very blissful state to be in. All right? So deliberate practice leads to flow. It feels uncomfortable at first. It pushes us beyond our boundaries just a little bit, but then it leads to this blissful flow state. So the key is it needs to be the right level of challenge. If something is too easy, it's boring. You don't get any flow. But if something's too challenging, then it's too intense, it's exhausting, it's overwhelming, and again, you don't achieve flow. But if something's just the right level of challenge, then you get this blissful flow state. And Alexandru says, yes, it's called being in the zone. And exactly, it's the same idea. You're in the zone. And as a side note, I over the pandemic, I started playing video games. And if you've ever played a video game, you might find sometimes the first few levels are kind of tricky. It pushes you out of your comfort zone. But then you get to the right level of challenge, you get familiar with the controls, and suddenly it puts you in a flow. And that's when a game gets sort of addictive. But the crazy thing is the game is increasing the level of challenge stage by stage. Things gradually get more and more difficult. And once you complete the game, you might go back to those earlier levels and they suddenly feel really easy. It's crazy that it develops your level of skill, if you can call it that, by putting you into a flow state. And then you go back to what you once found difficult and it feels easy. So it pushes us beyond our comfort zone to increase our skill level. So this is a metaphor that can absolutely be applied to your practical training skills. Michaela says, how do you come up with the right challenges? Well, we'll talk about that in a second. I will show you the sort of building blocks for all of this. But just before we do that, this whole thing was an attitude taken on by one of music's greatest teachers. You might know who I'm going to talk about. It is Nadia Boulanger. And of course, I made a video a few months ago on Nadia Boulanger. She's one of my favorite historic teachers of music. Just an astonishing teacher. She taught Leonard Bernstein, Daniel Barenboim, Elliot Carter, Aaron Copland, Philip Glass, so many others. I can't remember the full list because it's so large. She was an incredible teacher, extraordinary. But there's two things I want to point out about her attitude. One thing I read that she said, and I wish I could remember where I read it. She said, when people are studying medicine, they have to study intensively for 5 or more years in order to qualify for a doctor. So these people study intensively for 5 or more years, sometimes 8 or more years. So why isn't it the same with musicians? Why don't musicians take their craft so seriously? Now, one answer is that musicians don't normally have someone else's life in their hands. But I think that that's almost her point. Her point is that most other subjects you have to study seriously before you can be qualified. Think of medicine or engineering or architecture or something. This takes serious study. So why do people treat music differently? Now, sure, for some people, music is just a hobby. They pick up their guitar in the evenings just for fun or whatever. That's fine. It's a lovely hobby to have. But what Madame Boulanger is saying is that if you want to become a great musician, you need to take it seriously. Put in the study, put in the actual work, because every other profession needs to put in the study. So you should do the same with music. And there's one other story about Nadia Boulanger. Yeah, Quincy Jones, she taught as well. But Nadia Boulanger once taught the great pianist and conductor Daniel Barenboim. And Barenboim was a child prodigy on the piano. And he traveled to Paris to have a few lessons with Madame Boulanger. And she must have known he was talented. Because in their first lesson, she sat him down and she gave him a Bach fugue in A minor. And she said, I want you to play this fugue in E flat minor. Now, if you don't know, that's an incredibly difficult thing to do. It's already hard enough to sight read a Bach fugue, but to play it in a completely different key is demonic. So why did she do this? Well, there's two reasons why she did this. First, she wanted to push him out of his comfort zone. She knew he was a prodigy. She knew he was already great at the piano. So how do you push someone at that level to grow? By stretching their comfort zone. So this challenge for him would push him out of his comfort zone. That's great teaching. But the other thing is, this wasn't just about playing piano. By doing this, Barenboim had to learn about the musical relationships between each note in the piece. So when you have to play a piece of music in a different key, you have to think about the relationship between each note. And Barenboim said that this lesson was immensely influential on his ability to think about music, understanding how the notes relate to each other. So she was training his musicianship. She wasn't just teaching him the piano or just teaching him a Bach fugue, she was training his musicianship. And that's the same kind of philosophy I think we should all embody. You know, I would like to embody in my teaching, training not just music, but musicianship. So what you really need, and someone asked about this, what you really need is a clear, structured progression that takes what you know and gradually pushes you out of your comfort zone. Teaching all these musicianship skills from multiple angles, how can we develop a structured progression? So I'm curious if you have thoughts in the comments, and maybe you do. In fact, before we answer this question, I just poked through the Goldilocks zone. Mike says about finding that right level of discomfort. La 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 la. Jean-Loup loves waltzes. Okay, that's all right. No questions still. Great. So what you need is a structured progression. So what I'm going to do is look at 3 different elements of music. Rhythm, whoops, that didn't go. Rhythm, pitch, and ear training. And ideally, you would be working on these 3 elements all at the same time. And I'm going to look at their progressions one at a time, just for the sake of this video. But you want to be working on these 3 elements together holistically, right? It's so important to build these elements all at the same time. Otherwise, you might be really good at pitch, but terrible at rhythm. Or you might have amazing rhythm, but be terrible with pitch. Hello, my drum players out there. You know, it's important to work on these 3 skills holistically. So let's start with rhythm. Okay, so what's the first ladder in progression? I would say whole notes, half notes, quarter notes. This is the dead basic. This will be simple for many of you probably, but still super basic. Just whole notes. That's in England. We, you know, I've been talking American so long I've almost forgotten what they're called. Quarter notes are crotchets, aren't they? Half notes are minims. I've forgotten what a whole note is. Semi-breve, isn't it? Semi-breve. Oh wow, I'm ashamed of myself. It's like calling a lorry a truck. Anyway, the basic building blocks of music. You want to practice reading rhythms, not just knowing what they are. It's dead easy. It's piss easy to learn what they are. Yes, I know this is 4 beats, this is 2 beats, this is 1 beat. But it's learning to read them. It's learning to write them. It's learning to listen and hear and process them. That's how it sinks in. So don't be deceived if you know what these things are. That's not the point of all of this. Our key skills is about learning them practically, by practicing them. That's how it sinks in. That's how you develop fluency. So, next is time signatures. I would learn basic time signatures. 2/4, 4/4, maybe even 3/4. I can't remember whose favorite that was. The old waltz signature. Not everything in 3/4 is a waltz, but 2/4, 4/4, 3/4. And again, remember that you are reading, writing, listening, and transcribing or processing music in these time signatures. And then from there, let's up the ante just a little bit with eighth notes. Now, eighth notes are twice as fast as quarter notes. So what happens when you suddenly introduce eighth notes is that the level of complexity escalates quite a bit, because suddenly you can start to introduce really quite complex rhythms. You can really, this isn't too complex, but you can really start to introduce quite complex rhythms. So don't underestimate eighth notes. Again, it's easy to know what a thing is. It's a different thing to be able to process it fluently, to be able to read it fluently, write it fluently, process it, hear it fluently. And so from there, anyone reading this? Ba 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 ba. Not too difficult, but it can get much harder than that as well. And if that is tricky for you, then that's great. That's good, because there's work to be done. So from here, once you get comfortable with eighth notes, I'd move on to ties. Ties are when two notes are strung together to make one longer note. So it's a good time to introduce ties. And again, this can increase complexity quite a bit because we're introducing another level of complexity just to push us even further out of our comfort zone, help us to grow those muscles even more. So in this case, what is it? Ba, 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 ba. So again, you know, if you need work on that, that's a good thing. Then after this, 16th notes. Again, this can increase the complexity quite a bit. It can really start to make things, because 16th notes are twice as fast as 8th notes, suddenly a whole new layer of complexity is introduced into the mix. After this, you want dotted notes, and we can, well, look at the 16th notes for fun. 1, 2, ba 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 ba. Okay. So then dotted notes after that. So the dotted notes, again, we're just adding on layer after layer of complexity. You could potentially switch dotted notes and 16th notes. That would be fine. You know, 16th notes are definitely arguably more complicated. But then with dotted notes, you can introduce rhythms like this, which do involve 16th notes as well. So after this, I would then introduce time signatures like 4-2, 3-2, 2-2, 4-8, 3-8, 2-8. Still simple meter, not too complicated. But more than that, I would introduce changing between all these different time signatures. So maybe you're moving from 2-4 into 4-8, or maybe you're moving from 4-8 into 3-2. So you're learning how to switch your sort of counting rhythm in your head. So that's a really valuable skill. And if this sounds scary, then remember that we've slowly worked our way up from here. From stage 1, we've worked our way up gradually. So by the time we get here, it's not that scary. And then from there, we can go to compound meters, you know, 9-8, 6-8, 6-4, so on, 9-4, maybe 9-2 if you're nasty. You know, these are meters where instead of thinking 1-2, 1-2, 1-2, we're thinking 1-2-3, 1-2-3, 1-2-3, 1-2-3. So it changes the way we think about meter. And then from there, we can go on to triplets, duplets, tuplets. It changes the way we think about rhythm again. And from there, again, irregular meters like 5-4, 7-8, irregular beats in the music. And then polyrhythms as well is sort of a much higher level of complexity. So, of course, if we had started out our rhythm journey with compound meters and triplets and irregular meters and polyrhythms, you would feel very sore indeed, and you would feel very confused and intimidated. But because we started with the very basics and slowly built our way up, just at the right level of challenge at each stage, we get to this point without it being too terrifying, right? So, hope that clears you up with rhythm. And of course, feel free to screenshot that. So, I'll give you 3 seconds to screenshot it. So, now what about pitch and ear training, which is the other element? So, I would start with stuff that we have already looked at. We looked at this in lesson 1. You know, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, or solfege if you prefer. So we looked at this in the first lesson, but it's a really important one. And this is literally where I would start with a beginner and get them comfortable with navigating around these numbers. 1, 3, 5, 1, 5, 3, 1, 1, 4, 6, 5, 3, 4, 2, 1, whatever it is. So after that, don't underestimate how important this is. It's critical. It's seriously important. After that, I would introduce you to the staff. And I would start doing similar exercises, but with notes on the staff. And again, we looked at this in lesson 2. It's all straightforward stuff so far. From there, I'd introduce you to clefs. Again, we looked at this in lesson 2. I'd mainly look at bass clefs and treble clefs, but of course you could also do alto clefs if that's important to you, or tenor clefs depending on your instruments or your goals. And then after that, key signatures. Again, we looked at all of this in lesson 2. So if you were there in lesson 2, you've already had a head start. So what I didn't say in lesson 2 is that while we are working on this, whilst we're getting familiar with all the clefs and staffs and key signatures, I would also introduce you to essential intervals. Really working on familiarizing your intervals. especially your small intervals. You're learning what the different intervals sound like. And by that I mean, that's your minor second, you know. And then your major second, minor second, major second, you know. And then a minor third, major third, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, so you are learning your essential intervals, and when you do this, why would you? Well, firstly, why would you do this? When you combine both these skills, navigating around the scale quickly and leaping around intervals quickly, then these skills really feed into each other. When they're combined, they sort of compound on each other and make the process of reading and writing music a lot easier. So eventually, you'll increase the complexity of music you're reading. There's some weird stuff going on in the chat, by the way. Yeah, I agree. There's nothing at all to feel bad about. Hey, sorry. Bizarre talks about mazurkas going on. I have no opinions whatsoever on the mazurka, except that Chopin wrote some wonderful ones. So anyway, let's focus on the lesson, okay? We're learning intervals and we're learning to navigate the scale at the same time. And why are we doing this? Because sometimes when music gets so complex, knowing where your tonic is and navigating around the tonic might not be enough. You might sometimes have to make a leap of an interval just through sort of blind knowledge of that interval. If you're singing something like Schoenberg, or if you're approaching complex chromatic work, then sometimes knowing your tonic isn't enough. Or sometimes we don't even know what the tonic is because we're in the process of changing key or in the process of changing our tonal center. There is no clear tonal center, and so we have to rely on intervals instead. That's why it's important to train your relative pitch and your secure knowledge of intervals at the same time. And there are clear ways of doing this, which I'll talk about later. So eventually you would then increase the complexity of your music, and you would, I don't know why it says C game 5, increase the difficulty of reading. So you do larger intervals and more tricky rhythms. So larger intervals might be, or, you know, more complex intervals, which will help you just practice your ears even more. Again, this might seem overwhelming, but if you start from the very beginning and build your way up, then you will get there. I promise you. One step at a time is the easiest way to do this. And eventually we can start adding in accidentals just to make our practice more holistic and deep. And from there, we can think about minor scale modes as well, and moving on to advanced ear training. One ear training skill I really like is playing a complex chord. Actually, that's not really complex at all. And you're thinking, what is the third note from the top in this chord? But what's the second note from the top? Now, what if, to take it even a level further, can you sing a tritone above the top note of this chord? Or what about from the bottom of this chord? Can you sing a tritone below the bottom of this chord? Or you can go even more complex chords, you know. What about and you can start trying to find the notes within that chord, but also singing intervals from the top or bottom note of the chord really trains your ear to a high level, so it's great. Really gets you listening and thinking about the music that's going on. And from there, you can start working at multiple lines at once. 2 lines, 3 lines, 4 lines, processing them. So there really is a clear, carefully laid out progression to go from beginner to advanced efficiently without jumping too many steps at once. If you follow this progression, it will feel comfortable to get to a really quite advanced level. That's what I believe in, and I hope this gives you a good idea of that progression. So are there any quick questions at this point? Because the point is you can get extraordinary results, and in a much more efficient way than if you just pick things up at random or learn as you go, which is what so many people do, where they pick up music that's too difficult for them and they feel overwhelmed by it. You can get great results, and this is how you build it up and progress more quickly and more efficiently. And ideally, you would train yourself to a point where you go beyond what's normal, beyond things you typically see in the real world. And by the way, I'll take 2 or 3 questions in a moment if you have any. So that's when you come. So if you go beyond what you'd normally encounter in the real world, then when you come back, it feels easy by comparison. So this is literally my roadmap for going from beginner to a totally new, someone who's totally new to practical music, to becoming a hero, to becoming really strong at it. And remember, all the way you should be reading, writing, and hearing as you're learning. It's not good enough to just know what something is. You need to practice it in order to be fluent at it. So let's see, any questions? Alexandru, if you're just starting, how to... Ed, I'll talk about your question at the end. Is it better to do ear training at an instrument or via an app or game? The answer is a bit of both. But I think it's best to have exercises which really train you at the right level of difficulty for you. How do you sustain yourself if you're husted? I don't understand. If you're just starting, how to sustain yourself if you're just starting? Practice. Set a goal or set a target for yourself, and find time to regularly practice. Make it a habit. If you can make something a habit, then you will naturally develop. If you can make going to the gym a habit, then you will naturally get fitter, or you will naturally lose weight or gain weight or whatever you're trying to do. Because people set diet goals where they're like, I'm going to lose 10 pounds, and then they meet that goal at last, and then over time they put it back on again because it was just a sort of 1 month goal. But if you set a habit of kind of practicing these things regularly, you will naturally get better over time in your own time. So FM42 says, this seems to go towards the impossible. Maybe if you're young enough, you might get there. But at my age, well, we've actually had very old people go through this kind of training. Sorry, not very old. Sounds a bit rude. I don't mean very old, but we've had retired people of that kind of age, go through this training and finish the training, get amazing results from it. So it is possible, as long as you still have your mental faculties. You might approach it with a different kind of zest, but you might approach it with more peace as well, because you're not stressed about impressing anyone. You're doing it for you. So actually, no, it's age doesn't matter. By and large, it really doesn't matter. It's just about commitment and practicing step by step, starting where you feel comfortable and slowly pushing out of yourself. I struggle to dissect chords. Is it a question of sheer brute repetition? Well, let's think about what a chord is. A chord is multiple intervals stacked on top of each other. So when you get really good at learning your intervals, you'll be able to hear that is 3 separate notes. 1, 2. But if I have, let me know. Okay, anyway, I'm just going to keep going and presume that you haven't lost me. But it's learning your intervals. 1, 2, 2, and also then recognizing very common chords. This is a very common chord, right? Very common chord. So yeah, given average musical ability and regular practice, everyone should be able to accomplish advanced ear training. I never want to say everyone, because there are some people who it's truly not in their blood. But most people, if you've got some knack for music, you say average musical ability. If you've got some knack for music, with practice and just regular practice, but the right kind of practice. Remember I said not running in circles, doing the same thing again and again and again. But the right kind of practice, yes. Yes, you can absolutely get to an advanced level of ear training. So I'm going to take more questions in a little bit. I'm back. Okay, good. I hope you didn't. I don't think you missed anything crucial. Sorry about that. I don't know why that happened. It says my internet's excellent, but whatever. So I'll take more questions in just a second. It's been really fun sharing this with you actually, and there's clearly a bunch more questions. So I know this workshop has really helped for some of you because I've been getting emails about this and everything, and maybe it's helped you. I hope that it has. And what you should know is that I have turned this roadmap into a reality, and some of you already know this. But the roadmap that I've just shown you, when I thought about it, I wanted to turn it into something real, where I actually take you through this roadmap by the hand, give you exercises, give you sight singing exercises, ear training exercises, writing exercises, taking you through every level of your theory from the ground up. So this workshop has given you a clear taster of that whole thing. But I put together a more sort of advanced training program which delivers the real thing, where every single exercise, every single piece of theory, all the teachings have been handcrafted to take you through this journey. From the very beginnings of rhythm, the simplest bits of rhythm, the simplest bits of pitch, right the way through to very advanced things, step by step. So it's a logical progression. There's exercises for every level of your theory in a logical progression, where you will learn theory in bite-sized chunks, and you will train that theory through exercises, reading, writing, listening, until it sinks in, and then you will move to the next level. So in a moment, I will take all your other questions. But you should know that just for the next few days, I think for the next 5 days actually, I am hosting a big discount on that program. It's the Musicality training program, and this dives deep into all of these skills. I think of it as a complete, holistic, step-by-step training program for all of these musicianship skills, which will take you from absolute beginnings to a university level of musicianship. And this program is designed to guide you every step of the way to develop the key skills needed to be first rate. And this is serious training for developing performers, composers, conductors, teachers who want to significantly raise their game. And it's designed to make sure that you are developing your musicianship from every angle. So the way it works is that you have bite-sized theory videos, little digestible lessons on music theory. They might be 4 minutes, they might be 6 minutes long, just little digestible lessons where you learn what something is. And then once you've learned that theory, you're immediately thrown into action with a variety of different games, exercises, and challenges where you can actually practice what you've been learning. And this has worked on hundreds of musicians. Actually, Hayley is one of the members of this program. She's here voluntarily to, I didn't ask her to be here, but she wants to sort of revise before her next year of college. So you can ask Hayley in the chat about the program. Another one of our students, Yassine, said this has been designed for anyone from beginner to more advanced, and Yassine was in the latter. So in the beginning it was really quite easy for Yassine, but soon the difficulty went up, and at the end it was very challenging, and it worked wonders for me. And right now I can listen to a song on the radio and I can figure out the chord progression, which is something I wouldn't have dreamed of doing before that. My rhythmic skills or rhythmic understanding is way better than it used to be. My sight singing as well, so I'm really happy with it. And I think I would definitely recommend it to anyone who is willing to put time and effort into training this skill. Or take Tyrone, who said, this wasn't just something that was supposed to help you bring everything to the next level. I think what he's saying is, this wasn't something that promised something but doesn't do anything. This actually does it. It has a lot of exercises from sight singing and writing music down, which can be challenging. It was beyond my comfort zone, but I pushed myself to do it, and I've since seen tremendous results. I'm not even through the course yet. Sorry, this is an exact transcription. I'm not even through the course yet, but I can take it at my own speed, but I can see tremendous results already, even though I'm not finished through the course yet. I'm more confident when singing. I don't need as much practice to sing. I can sing from sheet music. I can read music, and I can hear it in my head. Or take Michael. Okay, I don't know, all the other pictures were tiny. There's a full-size picture of Michael. But Michael says, before this program, I would have called myself almost tone deaf because I could hear pitches. But now, I'd say I've got basic relative pitch. And this program gives you the tools to develop your pitch further, which also means that when casually listening to music, which was crazy for me, you could actually hear how the music works. You could hear how it functions, and that was really crazy. And also, when I heard stuff, I found I could easily play it on the piano without looking for the keys and trying to figure it out by trial and error. I could just hear how the music works. And my sight singing is so much better. Before the program, I thought it's impossible to look at music and hear it in your head. But throughout this program, I learned how that works, which is super helpful when you compose because you don't have to sit at the piano. You can listen to it in your head and imagine it and write it down, which is so much better understanding. And my rhythm got a lot better, not only, and I think you get the point anyway. And you can watch the videos on the website if you want to see their full stories of how this program helped. So on top of the core program as well, there are also a bunch of bonuses. You get conducting lessons. You get lessons in functional harmony. You get and that will help you to recognize chords. I know a few people were asking questions about that. You get introduced to some of the world's greatest choral music, which actually becomes some of the exercises, which I know a lot of people think is awesome. And you get composing challenges with every module. it's super simple to get started. I really think this is of immense value. It's super simple to get started. You can go to the website. You can go now or straight after this call. It's insidethescore.com/musicality. Then you simply sign up for the program. It's super easy. It takes a couple minutes. And then finally, watch those bite-sized theory videos and follow through with the exercises to dramatically improve your musicianship. You will see results in literally a couple of weeks. So if you see remember that if you want to become a confident musician, my point is you need to take your training seriously. And if you want to transform your musicianship, develop great ears, sight reading, writing skills, then your next step is to go ahead and get registered for this training program. And for the next few days only, there's only a few days left, then there's a 40% off back to school special. So now's a great time to go for it. There's less than a week to take advantage of that. So it's a great time to go for this sort of back to school special. And I think when you're feeling inspired to change your life, to really build your musicianship to the next level, that's a great time to take action, to dive into it. So there's a few days left for this discount, so I definitely recommend diving in. And yeah, I'll put the link in the description right now. Sign up for the fall. And I'll give you the link, insidethescore.com/musicality. There we go. Okay, save. There we go. So questions. Yes, I've now put a link in the description as well. Thank you. All right. Can I have your questions? I just need a sip of water because I've been... Paul says, why USD, not GBP? The website I use only allows for one currency, and I found in my experience that USD is more universal. If I could make it so that each page for wherever you were looking from had the home currency, then I would, but unfortunately I can't right now. Salman says, I'm getting ready for a BA of composing. This is awesome. Great help. Thank you. Thanks so much. I'm really glad you've enjoyed it. Haley says, rhythmic dictation, huge struggle. It is for a lot of people. I'm definitely going to practice that every day. Good. I can hear and sing intervals in isolation, but I really struggle to do it when it's in the middle of a melody. How do I practice that? So that's something where the choral music can be a really good training wheels. This is from QAZ said. Choral music can be really good training wheels. Why? Because you have multiple different lines happening at the same time. And often you're having to sing a line in the middle of it all. You often don't have the melody. And so you're having to think about how your line fits into a larger picture. And again, in the program, we start with basic choral music, easy choral music, so that we can then gradually teach you how to sing choral music and then work on doing more advanced choral music and more advanced choral music. So we start with the easiest things, just simple chords. You know, how does it go? That kind of simple stuff. And then it goes on to, you know, at the highest level, Bach, B minor mass, that kind of thing, tricky stuff. So choral music would be really helpful for you. Lovely, Frank. Thanks for those. My main challenge is having the time to practice when no one can hear me. There's always someone nearby and I get so self-conscious that I end up not practicing at all. Maybe people in the comments have advice for cork. I've never had that issue come up before, but I'm curious to see, how would you advise cork, who feels anxious about people hearing him or her when sight singing? I'm not sure what to advise, actually, because my instinct is to say, forget about them. Again, you know, the gym metaphor comes in well, that, you know, people who are new to the gym are worried everyone's looking at them. The reality is nobody gives a damn. No one really cares. But I know it's not so simple as that. So I'm curious what other people would advise for cork. Alexandru says, how to manage time when training musicianship. You've got to make it a habit and be realistic about how much you can do for a day. If it's 10 minutes a day, or like say 10 minutes 4 times a week, and if that's all you can do, then that's still better than nothing. Or like 20 minutes 3 times 4 times a week, that's still better than nothing. And if you can just schedule it in and make it a habit, then that is the most valuable thing. Rather than setting things that are unrealistic, making a habit of just doing like regular bite-sized chunks will get you a lot further than doing 4 hours in one day and then nothing for 3 months, you know? Alexandru, how to manage time. Oh, sorry, I just read that. Ooh. It's holistic and what's the minimum? As I say, you know, even 10 minutes a day, don't think about completing it. Think about just incorporating it as a regular part of your training. Getting better is a process that takes different amounts of time for different people, and that's okay. So think about it as just a regular process. You know, I could say, how much time is it going to take me to become a master pianist? Nobody knows. How much time would it take me to learn the 4 Chopin ballades, which is sort of a secret dream of mine. I'd love to be able to play, or even just one of the Chopin ballades, but I never practice enough to ever get there. Maybe by the time I'm sort of 30 or something, maybe I'll be able to play one of the ballades. But nobody can answer that. And it would be much more effective just to find regular times to practice and slowly work towards that. Jan says, who do you recommend listening to improve your voice leading? What I would say, 2 things that will be really helpful. First is the New English Hymnal. I'm writing it in the chat. And the other thing is Bach, Riemann. I might spell this wrong. Collection of chorales. So if you play and study, start with the English Hymnal. There's some great hymns in there, but they have most of them, you know, 98% of them have fantastic voice leading. And so they will teach you good voice leading if you just, especially, you know, even just getting your hands around those hymns in the keyboard. It might take a while at first, but you will get familiar. LTB, thank you for signing up. By the way, if I didn't say, there's a 30-day guarantee on this program. So if you're unsure and you think this is for you, but you're not sure you want to make the commitment, try it out. There's absolutely nothing wrong with trying it out, seeing if it's for you. And if in 30 days you're like, this isn't for me, that's okay. You've finished the trial. You can write to me. You get all your money. But, you know, try it out. That's why the guarantee is there, because I know some people are like, is this for me? What if it's a trick? It's not a trick. Of course it's not a trick. But, you know, I know that because I've felt like that before. So that's why the guarantee is there. So you can absolutely try it out completely risk-free. Does anyone have an experience where you went to university, but you have graduated feeling like there's major gaps in your knowledge? Yeah. I mean, yes. I think that's sadly quite common. And what's especially sad about that is when people spend a lot of money and still aren't taught what they should have been taught. And, you know, no degree education can cover every single element of music, on the other hand. Obviously, that's impossible. But still, I know what you mean. And that can be disappointing. So, yeah, that's... But as you say, you know, the learning curve always goes on. And if you have time now to really practice your musicianship skills, then take advantage of that. Go for it. Mike says, can this course help with recognizing microtonal bends? So what this course will help you with is developing a real clear ear for, you know, the traditional 12-tone equal temperament. But then in the final modules, we start looking at tuning theory, which starts suggesting that equal temperament is not the best way of tuning, and actually tuning gets a lot more complex. So in a sense, in learning really clearly, well, the idea is that, you know, when you learn about tuning theory, you begin to realize that a C sharp is different from a D flat in the way that you are going to mentally tune it. Once you reach a certain level of musicianship, if that C sharp was written as a D flat, you would tune it slightly differently. because you would think about the musical relationships differently. This is all quite advanced. If this seems confusing to you, it does make sense once you get to that level. So, in a sense, microtonal bends is recognizing that there are spaces between the equal tempered 12 tones. So once you are able to clearly hear and navigate around the 12 tones, you can hear when something is tuned particularly flat or particularly sharp, which is what some people call microtones. So yes, in a sense, I mean, we don't have microtonal exercises, but we do talk about tuning and how tuning differs depending on how you write the notes, which is an interesting element of theory, but also depending on the sort of physics, the laws of physics behind the notes and the different temperaments and things. I hope that answers your question. La 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 la. Print your music on laminated. Just sing in the shower. I often get stuck. How should I handle that? Happens at the gym as well. Sorry, the gym metaphor seems to have come up a lot today. I can't remember who brought it up. Someone said it early on. But the gym, you know, you might plateau on a weight for a while, and you've just got to keep working on that weight until you feel strong enough to go on to a different weight. But also treat yourself well. You've got to get enough rest, eat enough food, or eat the right amount of food or whatever. And then one day suddenly, you'll take off again, and you'll suddenly be getting stronger much more quickly again. It's funny how it happens, but it does. So, la 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 la. Normalized audio says, I am great and it's all about me. I'm not sure what that means, or who that's referring to. But all of us, normalized audio, all of us have a lot to learn. And it's a sort of constant process of learning, which is really wonderful in a way, because learning is some of the most fun that you can get out of music in a way. There was always too much going on when I was in school. I know what you mean. So CA says, there was always too much going on. I feel like there wasn't much guidance in how to prepare. Yeah, sometimes things are so busy that you don't have time to focus on the important things. I've been there. American schools were like this as well. Anyway, I'm going to scroll down. Will this program, Avi says, will this program help in learning an instrument if one has problems learning one previously? It will help you with the theory and practical musicianship. I've talked about this a lot now, but musicianship is the mental game of music. It's mentally understanding music. If you had technical problems, like my sister used to learn the flutes, but she had really low blood pressure and she'd faint too often, so she stopped learning the flute. If you have physical problems with the instrument, this program is not about that. Won't help you with physical problems, but it will help you immensely with the mental game of music. Questions anymore? Is there more of a learning curve with jazz because of the way it breaks the rules? No. I mean, it's a different learning curve. In a way, it's less of a learning curve. In other ways, I don't think you ever stop learning with both of them. I've just recently, very recently, too recently to try and do any, but started to sort of learn jazz. And you find that knowing functional harmony, knowing intervals, knowing scales and how scales and modes work is really useful, no matter what genre of music you're trying to make, even metal or rock or whatever, it is useful. These skills are transferable. They're not classical centric. Choral music, sure, it's classical centric, but a lot of these skills, especially ear training, intervals, yada yada yada, very important to your musicianship, whatever you're doing. Is there a way to train intonation specifically, or will it come along with the practice of musicianship? It will come a lot with the practice of musicianship, as well as, again, I really love practicing singing choral music, even singing choral music with a recording, because the more you practice it, the more you begin to hear when you're out of tune. If you're truly listening, and singing choral music also trains your listening, to be able to sing and listen, to think and listen at the same time. If you do that, you can really begin to hear how you're tuning. So yeah, a lot of these skills just come with time and repetition, and suddenly one day you'll realize that you're doing it. Jan says, if you want to learn from the scores of your role models, should you always transcribe them by ear? Is using written scores such a bad thing? No, because transcribing by ear, it might be way too challenging. the way I learn now from scores of my role models is by learning them by memory. So I take the score and I actually memorize it as much as I can. And some scores it's easier than others. And through memorizing, you're like really getting it into your bloodstream. So when you're trying to compose something in future or remember a technique, it feels organic, it feels fluent because you've already memorized it. Does that make sense? I mean, I talk about this a lot more. There's an interview in Spotify, on my podcast, A Composer's Journey, with David Conte, where we talk about this a bit. But it's really interesting. If you try memorizing a piece of music from someone you love, or a piece of music you love, you'll find that it really influences the way you think about, say, composing. So try it out. Are you going to do a lesson on improvisation? Maybe in the future. I got to get better at improvising myself, frankly. It's not my strong point. But a funny thing is, I think it's my confidence. I used to improvise fairly confidently. And then I got my confidence knocked a bit in undergrad. And I was like, I can't do it at their level. And so I sort of had this belief in my head that I couldn't do it. And I'm beginning to realize that actually you can do it. It's only your fear of looking stupid that's holding you back. So I think, again, as you improve your instrument skills and your musicianship, improvisation becomes more possible. But improvisation is a skill in itself, which deserves practice. And I've got to start practicing that more. Great. I think I'm going to stop with questions there because we've been for an hour. But remember, for the program, there is a discount now, 40% discount. It's a great discount for back to school, and it's on for the next few days only. And there's even a guarantee. So if you want to try out the course for a few weeks, figure out if it's for you. If it's not for you, then you've put no money down. You know, it's risk-free if you want to try it out. But I know that pretty much all of you will love it because I've known so many people who've really found their musicianship transformed by this. They're exercises that approach musicianship from every single angle. So I really hope that these help you. I've really enjoyed this workshop. There will be a bonus lesson next week, in the next few days, for those who have signed up for the full workshop. So look out for that. That's where we talk about the 4 different phases of learning to sight sing in a lot more detail. So if you haven't signed up for the workshop, I will put the link in the chat now. In fact, I'll put the link in the description. Why not? For the full workshop. Here we go. Okay. But with that said, thank you so much, everybody. It's always great to interact with the audience, get to know people a bit more. Yeah, thank you. All right. Thanks, everybody. So I'm going to say goodbye. Lots of love to you all. Keep listening to music. Keep practicing music. Keep loving music. Hope to see a bunch of you in the program because it was a great experience putting it together, and it was a great experience for many people going through it. So I know that you'll love it, and you can always try it out and see if it's for you and take advantage of this back to school discount. So much love. Bye-bye, and thank you.